I welcome the fact that more and more testing is now focused on community transmission, but until that is the case, we won't have a full handle on the extent of the spread of COVID-19. We need to do two things: flatten the curve and also prepare for the peak. In that vein, we very much welcome the announcement this morning from the government and the chief nurse about the extension of an invitation to retired nurses and to additional critical care training for 20,000 nurses. These are good steps which have our full support, of course. We need to ensure the hospitals and intensive care in particular is fully staffed at the time of the peak of COVID-19, and these are sensible measures which we support. In keeping with our approach of making constructive suggestions to the government, we're also making another suggestion today. There are, we estimate, slightly more than 1,000 nurses in Australia who are international nurses. They are here on working holiday visas. Their visa requirements require them to go and do things like pick fruit, not to work in hospitals. In this crisis, that is simply not sensible, and we do believe the working holiday visa requirements on those nurses should be waived. We need every possible nurse working in hospitals. We need every possible nurse available for the medical fraternity and medical services. And the government recently made some changes to nursing students, international nursing students, which again we welcome, but these are fully qualified nurses who we need operating. Kristina will talk in a little more detail about how their working holiday visa arrangements we're suggesting would work, and of course she'll also talk about the farce of the cruise ships and other matters. Kristina.
Thank you, Chris. Yes, in Australia we estimate there are probably around 1,000 nurses fully qualified who are currently prevented from working continuously in our hospitals. And what better place for a nurse than in a hospital? But due to the requirements of their working holiday visa, they are required after 6 months with one employer to go and work in a key area, most often picking fruit. We have had stories of nurses who have been sent out of hospitals off for a 3-month stint to pick fruit in order to maintain their visa and to be able to stay in the country. Now, there are some simple fixes to this. They're the kind of fixes that government has done previously in, for example, following bushfires, when it comes to temporary migrants who have skills that we urgently need. We need all hands on deck when it comes to having the medical support in our hospitals. And quite frankly, it is not in Australia's best interest if we have fully qualified nurses in our country and willing to work. In fact, many of them have been working in hospitals who have been sent out to do other jobs like picking fruit. Of course, fruit picking is important, and there are ways that we can fill that labour gap. But when it comes to having a qualified nurse, we need a qualified nurse. And if they are here in the country, we encourage the government to make changes to the working holiday visas so that these qualified nurses can come and work in our hospitals. Now, when it comes to the Ruby Princess cruise ship, in fact, the 4 cruise ships that have appeared and disembarked their passengers after the Prime Minister said there would be no more cruise ships. Well, we are starting to see the calamitous results of that decision to allow these 4 cruise ships to arrive and disembark passengers freely. We're starting to see those calamitous results unfold. Today, front page of The Australian, we see that 1/3 of all the deaths that have occurred in relation to coronavirus in Australia can be attributed to those cruise ships. We know that the Ruby Princess cruise ship now accounts for more cases of coronavirus outside New South Wales than in New South Wales. It accounts for about 10% of all cases across Australia. In fact, we also know that it accounts for about 25% of the cases in South Australia. On the 15th of March, the Prime Minister stood before the nation and said that the federal government would not allow cruise ships to arrive. 4 days later, the Ruby Princess arrived. It disembarked 2,700 passengers, and those passengers have unknowingly spread the coronavirus right across Australia. Now, we welcome these border measures that have come in very recent days, but they have come too late. They have come too late. And more astoundingly, the Commonwealth Government, which is responsible for our borders at the ports and at the airports, has handballed the responsibility for quarantine measures to state governments. After trying to blame New South Wales for the Ruby Princess, the federal government has now given New South Wales and Victoria, as well as all other states, the responsibility for implementing quarantine measures at our ports, our airports, and our seaports. Now, it does lead us to ask, why has there been deafening silence from Peter Dutton? I mean, for heaven's sakes, where is Peter Dutton? We have a border security crisis on our hands, and we have heard nothing from the Home Affairs Minister. Now, when he was diagnosed with coronavirus, I was one of the first to wish him well. I have wished him well in letters since then. I wish him well today. But the Minister for Home Affairs has turned up on 2GB radio. He has said that he is feeling well. He is capable of working from home. So if he is capable of working from home and continuing to do his job, it is incumbent that he stand up and explain to the nation how this border security failure occurred and what steps he is going to take to ensure that those responsibilities that have now been handed to the state governments are being implemented in a way that ensures that Australians stay as safe as possible when it comes to the spread of the coronavirus. So I look forward to Peter Dutton standing up in whatever form he can, whether it's from home, whether it's on radio, whether it's an interview through Zoom or Skype. We're all doing it now. Mr. Dutton can do it. And if he's not capable of doing it, then perhaps the Prime Minister needs to look at appointing an acting Home Affairs Minister, because we are talking about nothing less than the security of our Australian borders.